Hey guys, Paul here. So today I wanted to talk about a really good tweet that I saw recently from Farfa that is called "The Four Horsemen of Irreparable Damage to People's Perception of Yu-Gi-Oh!" This is a pretty funny tweet, but it's also one that I really do agree with. Basically, what you see here is this picture of a Tiermans Ditto from YCS Pasadena 2022. You see a picture of a Nirvana High Paladin, a picture of the tournament policy updates around Hygiene, and a picture of a Yu-Gi-Oh player winning an air fryer at a tournament. So, right off the bat, if you just look at these pictures, you're probably thinking, Paul, these are jokes, right? Like those don't accurately represent Yu-Gi-Oh. They're very misleading. Anybody who plays this game knows this stuff isn't true. And for the most part, I do agree, actually. Like, none of this stuff is really, like, there's kind of two sides to each of these stories, right? But I can see why individually each of these things really does not look good to an outsider looking into Yu-Gi-Oh! So I guess let's start with the first one, which is this Tiermans mirror match. Like I said, this is from YCS Pasadena, and this was when the Tiermans deck was tier 0. So this was the deck at its full power. All the key cards were at 3. They had access to all of the Ishizu mill cards and shufflers. They had Bystials at full strength. They had 3 Heralds of Orange Light. It was just an insanely powerful deck with really strong cards. And it kind of ended up looking a lot like this. In this mirror match, you can see cards splayed out all over the mat. And this is kind of how these mirror matches looked a lot of the times. Many cards got milled, chains got formed, oftentimes going up to chain link 6, 7, 8, even 9. And even after that chain would resolve, you'd have another chain because there'd just still be more effects to resolve. And this deck was just insanely powerful. I think the thing about this picture is that it is, from an outsider's perspective, this is a mess. This doesn't look like Yu-Gi-Oh! At all. This is not the Yu-Gi-Oh! That you know and love. This is cards splayed everywhere. Leading up to this, Yu-Gi-Oh! Already has had a reputation of being like way too many cards and long combos and turns of unbreakable boards and just, kind of things going everywhere and having complicated rules. And this feels like it's just sort of the pinnacle of it, right? Like, who could possibly manage this? Who could possibly handle this? This looks like a complete mess. How do you keep up with all these cards just everywhere? Now, like I said, that's kind of a half truth. Yes, there were some really complicated game states that went on in this mirror match, but these are just cards in the players' graveyards. Them being splayed out like this kind of looks as though they're all in play and like this is really complicated and it's just, it's a mess and the cards are everywhere. But they're doing it like this so that they can just accurately see what each card is, what each card does, and, just like have a good sort of visual angle on it. Would it have been nicer to have something like Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel where, you can kind of just cleanly see chain links and activation windows and stuff? Yeah, but this is just sort of the consequence of playing a physical game. Another thing to add too is that most players actually seemed to enjoy Tiermans Dittos. So if you ask most top players, they found that it was a mirror match that was very skillful and had a lot of options. And this is like one of Jesse Cotton's favorite decks to play mirror matches with and stuff. People like Tiermans. The thing is, it kind of depends on who you ask. Like, obviously, it's still a very powerful meta deck, so there's a contingent of people who hate it on that basis. But, people playing this deck at this event were, generally speaking, actually enjoying themselves and enjoying this matchup. So I think it is maybe a little duplicitous to say that this is just a complete mess. But Farfa's right that if somebody just asked, like, what the hell is going on, I would understand, like, why they think that. So I am glad that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has not ever quite reached this low point in terms of, how kind of the game state can look and resolve. There is a similar picture to this, which I'm sure somebody probably left in the comments actually. Yeah, this one where it's the, all those zones getting locked from the Cashdera lock. That one's also pretty ugly. It's funny too, because I remember people would do edits of this where somebody edited this picture and like put more cards on it or whatever. But yeah, so you can see why, as an outsider looking in, this is not good. And when Yu-Gi-Oh! Looks like this, it is kind of just at its worst. Next picture, Nirvana High Paladin. So this is one that people oftentimes cite as like, this is when Yu-Gi-Oh! Died or when Yu-Gi-Oh! Was ruined and made it too complicated because it is a pendulum monster, which out the gate, people did not love pendulum monsters. They did not like that they were half monster, half spell. All of the new symbols and zones that came with them, like the fact that there's, 2 text boxes, these weird scale numbers, these symbols, like what do they all mean? It's crazy. And, to be fair, I don't love pendulum monsters. I don't love them or hate them. I don't tend to play many pendulum decks myself. The mechanic doesn't speak to me, but it's not an impossible mechanic to learn by any means. It's really pretty straightforward. I think that Konami's big issue was that when Pendulums came out, they already were, going to have to deal with the fact that it's a new summoning mechanic, and people always have a little bit of like tension and resistance to that. I remember when Synchros came out, that was the case. I remember when Xyz came out, that was the case. So Pendulums had it rough because they really were rocking the boat and changing the way the game was played. Like there's these new zones, and they go to the extra deck, and their monsters here and their spells here. But the truth about Nirvana High Paladin is that this isn't a card that people actually play. It doesn't really see very much play, and so I think that like using it as an example of a card that has like way too much text or is way too complicated is, maybe not exactly the good faith representation of Pendulum monsters. I will say though, Ruxin raises a good point. He mentions Endymion, the Mighty Master of Magic, which kind of falls into the same category of being a card with way too much text. I think that this is the card that like has the record for the most amount of words in a card effect. And it, if you want to point to kind of as a continuation of the Tiermans thing, point to like Yu-Gi-Oh getting way too complicated and being too hard to follow. Unfortunately, this is a really, really good example of that. It is oftentimes used in memes of like, this is how crazy Yu-Gi-Oh is. Well, I can't read this card. I have to use a microscope. These cards are novels. Yeah. So not good, but I do think that like pendulums aren't actually as crazy as people sort of say they are. And also like, it's not even like the mechanic kind of as it is now sucks since like Electromite's banned and Konami doesn't seem to really make super powerful pendulum archetypes anymore. So yeah. Okay. Next one is the hygiene thing. This one's always fun. So Konami a few years ago had to update the tournament policy guidelines to basically explicitly tell people you are expected to be clean when you enter a tournament. If you neglect to wash or put on clean clothes, it contributes to an unpleasant atmosphere at the event, and the tournament can be crowded and the day can be long. People who neglect self-care to the point that they are negatively impacting the tournament might be asked to correct the issue in order to continue with the event. So this is pretty obvious. Gamers in general have a reputation of being like stinky and smelly and having no hygiene, right? We don't wash our hair, we don't take showers, we don't wear deodorant. It's not just a Yu-Gi-Oh thing. It's a thing that you see at video game tournaments, particularly Smash Bros is kind of known for it, or people joke about it. You hear about it at conventions. And I think that this one is rough because there's nothing actually wrong with this policy. I think the policy itself is totally reasonable. Like, yeah, if a person actually smells awful, they should be asked to correct it or they need to like leave the event. The thing is though, it continues that narrative of like Yu-Gi-Oh players just being filthy slobs and, just kind of the dirty nerd who doesn't clean themselves. But it's like, I don't think that Konami like made this. Obviously they didn't make this with the intention of it like reflecting poorly on Yu-Gi-Oh players, but it's one of those things that you can share as just a funny joke. And I will admit, we like, in Team APS videos and skits and stuff, we've, joked about Yu-Gi-Oh hygiene because it is one of those things that like you can go to card shops and experience it and it can be really awful. But I don't think it's like exclusive to Yu-Gi-Oh players. So yeah. Still though, if an outsider sees this, they will think, wow, Yu-Gi-Oh players must stink. This actually reminds me too of this other there's that one story, I think, based on like a tournament in Japan where like a girl had to drop from a tournament because the smell was so bad or something like that. And it turned out that story was fake and like it was like, staged or whatever, not a real thing. So yeah, that's not great. But anywho, yeah, hygiene, it's a thing, but it's not like just a Yu-Gi-Oh thing. And the final one is the air fryer thing. So this has been a new development in Yu-Gi-Oh that's kind of started over the last year or so, where tournaments like locals and regionals are giving out air fryers as the prizing, like as part of the prize support. So I guess in addition to maybe whatever you might normally get as a prize, which isn't really very much from most Yu-Gi-Oh regionals and stuff, like a deck box, a mat, whatever, you also win an air fryer. This, I think where this went wrong is that a lot of people view this as like, okay, this is Konami is sending them these air fryers and like saying that like this is the Yu-Gi-Oh prize support, and like Yu-Gi-Oh already has like kind of this rep of not great prize support and stuff. But this was in almost every case, I believe, this is just the hosts of the regional adding a sort of prize on top of what you would normally get. Konami is not like buying random air fryers and giving them out to people. It's just an extra thing that a person can get like on top of winning. As to the optics of it, no, it is not good. This just feels like a very random, arbitrary thing, and obviously people would rather have like cash money or something for winning a tournament. But I'm gonna play devil's advocate here and actually say that like if my locals gave me an air fryer for winning like a large local or like a sneak peek size thing, maybe 20 or 30 people or something, I wouldn't hate it. I mean, like air fryers are actually pretty useful, and they're like they're worth, depending on like how cheap of one or expensive one you get, maybe like $100. So It, like, I don't think it's like fair to say that this points to Yu-Gi-Oh having good or bad prize support, because this isn't prize support that Konami is really providing, and so if it's just something that's on top of what you would normally get, I don't think anybody can complain. So yeah, I think that this one's funny. As I said, I have no notes. I think all four of these pictures are real, sadly. Like, these are real things I've heard. I oftentimes go to conventions, like anime conventions and other stuff like that, and I will meet more like, former Yu-Gi-Oh players or people who just kind of have Yu-Gi-Ohs in the periphery. And they will oftentimes say, they've seen one of these things. Like, I quit when they came out with those pendulum monsters that were half monster, half spell. They don't even know they're called pendulums. They'll just be like, when they made the half monster, half spell thing. Or things like that. Or, like, I saw some, like, I've literally seen people be like, I saw they were making them play for an air fryer. What's Yu-Gi-Oh come to? It's like, Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't come to anything. I mean, that's just a prize that, like, the shop decided to add on to. So, yeah, none of this stuff is really fair, but it is sadly true. I want to hear from you guys, though. What do you think? Like, do you feel like these four horsemen, so to speak, are, how much truth or lies, fact or fiction is there to each of these things? What do you think about them? Let me know down in the comments. It'd be just a fun conversation to talk about. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one, probably tomorrow, I guess, when the Pot of Greed episode airs. So, yeah, fast turn.